Welcome everybody on behalf of the Global Alliance for Building and Construction. I am Cédric Borel, the Managing Director of A4MT, Action for Market Transformation. I'm very happy to welcome you all and welcome all the speakers to disclose this report on behalf of the Global Alliance for Building and Construction, report funded and thanks to ADEM International, elaborated by Ifpeb and A4MT with numerous contributors and speakers today. And I pay tribute to our former colleagues, Marine Girard and our intern Hugo, which were key in animating this year of work on sufficiency. And the Sufficiency Action Group of the GlobalABC became a hub. That means, in simple terms, that sufficiency will be key in the future of the GlobalABC as a permanent work group and worldwide work group. I am alongside with Damien Tamizier.
Hi, everybody.
And so, to put it simply, in the built environment, the GlobalABC status report for 2024 told us in February that we are not on tracks by far. A new decarbonization index has been elaborated and it's telling us we are not on tracks. There is kind of a decarbonization sailing we cannot break. So from the IPCC came a new concept, and the concept after efficiency came the concept of sufficiency. So the aim, the goal of this report was to translate how sufficiency is relating to the built environment. So a huge work has been done, which will be revealed. And so I'm giving the floor to David Ness, which will start with what is sufficiency and how it does apply to the built environment. To you, David.
Yes, thank you, Cédric. I speak with you all from the lands of the Kaurna people on the Adelaide Plain, South Australia. I'll just share my screen. Okay. Why do we need a sufficiency revolution? As Lisa Richmond from Architecture 2030 expressed very clearly, emissions are driven by how well we build and how much. By focusing on the former, we are missing half the equation. So we are building far too much in the wrong places. I've been very concerned about this for a long time. Written articles, a book, and I've lobbied people, but it's very hard to change. But what we witness is the pursuit of more, bigger, so-called green buildings with low carbon materials, but it's not enough. And even Bill Gates recognized that buildings are bad for the climate. He wrote an article about that when he even recognized embodied carbon. So it is projected that resources consumed by construction will double by 2060. And this is equivalent to another Paris every 5 days, or another New York City every 34 days, as shown in the picture on the right. So that's hard to imagine. And surely that is building too much. At the same time, patterns of consumption and building growth are grossly inequitable. While the richest 10% are responsible for 50% of all emissions, impoverished societies cry out for shelter, infrastructure and services. And on the right at the bottom, you can see what's called the champagne glass diagram, which actually comes from the Agenda 21 Rio in 1992. It's still very relevant. And the rich inhabit the bowl and the poor the stem. So current decarbonisation policies on increasing energy efficiency and renewables are failing to meet climate targets, because any gains are surpassed by the increasing growth in floor area and the carbon embodied in the production and construction of buildings. The path to sufficiency. Sufficiency is really about focusing on meeting human needs rather than wants. And as Cedric mentioned, the IPCC report in 2022 on mitigation emphasised that sufficiency policies were urgently required to dramatically cut emissions by around 17%. But unfortunately, there's been a very poor response so far. And sufficiency was defined as measures and practices that avoid demand for natural resources, energy, materials, land, etc., while delivering well-being for all within planetary limits. The Buildings Breakthrough 2023, which was launched actually 1 year ago at COP28, that called for increased energy efficiency and renewables. But inside the report, it stated that sufficiency measures must complement these via a sufficiency, efficiency, renewables framework. And you can see that on the right-hand side with sufficiency in red. And sufficiency must come first in that framework. Next, the sufficiency was put firmly on the agenda at the Buildings and Climate Global Forum, Paris, March this year. The resulting declaration of Chalo highlighted unsustainable resource consumption, and actually sufficiency rated a small mention, but it was there. And also, as I think Cedric mentioned, there was a sufficiency session of the event convened by Maureen Gerard and the Sufficiency Action Hub. So today's launch marks a significant milestone for the building sector and actually the whole world. I really passionately believe it's important, not just for buildings, but for the whole world. This is because the wider built environment, which includes not just buildings, but infrastructure, can have a major impact. It is responsible for about 40% of emissions and resource consumption. Furthermore, if we make this shift properly to sufficiency, sufficiency can be a positive in terms of jobs and profitability. I think that's really mentioned, but I'll come on to that in a minute. So quickly, the key findings of the report. The single most important recommendation is to integrate a sufficiency first principle into all policies for building and decarbonisation. All. Other supporting recommendations I've listed here, but firstly, governments and public bodies must act now and lead by example. In the report, actually, it stated we cannot afford for this sufficiency to take 20 years to take off. And of course, it's not just public bodies, but industry has a role too. And actually, I must commend Architecture 2030 in North America. They're doing wonderful things. And also in Denmark, there's the reduction roadmap, which is also driven by industry, not by public bodies. The next point is the report said we need to reconsider and review the high buildings growth scenarios for 2060. That is another Paris every 7 days, etc. These assume a linear increase of per capita area driven by increasing affluence, which is seldom questioned. Of course, some territories will need to expand to meet their needs, while others will need to shrink their demand. That is, the wealthier countries. Over 20 years ago, the diagram on the right-hand side highlighted the need to shrink and converge global consumption. And that was produced by the Factor 10 Institute. And you can see the global north decreasing rapidly, while the south can initially increase and then drop down to converge. The next point, a very important point, is the need to establish top-down carbon budgets for cities, sectors and buildings. Countries like my own, with a well-developed stock and infrastructure, will have a smaller budget, while growing societies will have a higher budget to meet their needs. The next point is the question to the need to question the requirement to build new. It needs to be justified in the first place. And actually there is already some thinking and approaches along these lines. For example, the ARIP Circular Economy Toolkit has its first question and strategy is build nothing, refuse unnecessary new construction. This should all form part of the upfront development approval process with regards to carbon budgets. It's too late at the building approval process, I believe. This has got to be attended to upfront. And the next point is a very important point highlighted at the Sufficiency session in Paris, particularly by Lloyd Alter, the need to avoid and reduce upfront embodied carbon. By questioning new builds, floor space can be constrained and upfront carbon reduced. This will also reduce ongoing operational carbon.
David, if you can get 2 minutes.
Yep, operational carbon associated with increased floor area. The sufficiency first principle can not only underpin decarbonisation, but also regeneration, circularity, nature positive, and a just transition. A holistic system view is required. So just a few final remarks and questions. An important question is, can our sector prosper while building less new? Actually, the report states sufficiency is an economic opportunity with important savings everywhere. But the implications of sufficiency policies for architects, contractors and others in the industry must be clearly demonstrated. To make the required shift with creative frugality in architecture, they must see opportunities for continued profit and employment. There are also opportunities arising from an industry shift from new build to stewardship and management of existing assets. So that's an area for new profits and work. The next point is it's important to look at creative alternatives to new builds, such as refurbishment and adaptive reuse, which is being looked at in my city, which have the potential to generate more jobs while also being profitable and reducing carbon. And finally, I want to say, I believe architects can have some new roles, such as a more influential role with their clients up front, assisting them with their important upfront decisions, their strategic asset management and their portfolio management. So finally, I just want to thank you, and I just want to say my city, Adelaide, is bidding for COP31 in 2026. So if we're successful, I hope to welcome you all here to South Australia, Adelaide, South Australia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David, for this very interesting and captivating introduction. We'll now give the floor to Lorenzo, who will show us why sobriety is desirable and how it can be applied with some example. So I just have to switch roles and okay, Lorenzo, you get the floor. Please do not forget to switch on your mic, please, Lorenzo.
To do, okay, yeah. I think, is that okay now? Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, good. So I will, thanks for the first overview on the report that David has given. My role is to give some examples of how sufficiency is not only necessary, not only possible, it's desirable from a number of points of view, and give some examples. I teach building physics in Milano, so I go on to the next slide. We've been working for decades on the concept of, and policies and applications for efficiency, where we try to decrease energy use to deliver a certain fixed output, decrease the fuel input to a motor to deliver a certain mechanical power, displacement of a car over a certain distance, maintaining the type of service, the kilometers traveled in private cars, for example, or even making it grow and sometimes unreasonably making it unreasonably large, like more travels or larger weight and number of cars. Sufficiency takes a very different route, tries to change the type of service we are aiming for. So efficient public transport, cycling, walking, to substitute travels in private cars when this is possible, make cities adapted again to children, elderly people, more enjoyable use of space. And this at the same time has influence on buildings, for example, because if streets are more quiet and silent, this allows to open buildings to the exterior, enjoy time out on a balcony, perform natural ventilation at night, and further reduce energy use. So I will try to show some pictures about this. So in summary, we can think of delivering a certain service, all windows closed day and night, buildings with large glazed surfaces, no external solar protection, men dressed with long sleeves, a tie, formal jacket, relatively heavy clothing in summer, chairs which also add thermal insulation to the body, and hence you set point, you have to actively cool the environment at 22, 24 degrees. That's a type of service we can have. Sufficiency talks of another type of service, and probably with a number of also pleasant outcomes, not only saving energy, but living better in those buildings. Windows open at night to allow the cool air in the building and store coolness in the mass of the building. Have this natural ventilation, which obviously is far from being a new concept. Here I show a building, La Ville Radieuse of Le Corbusier, wearing light coats, also men, chairs which are made of thin metal or tissue, not to add insulation to the body, and air velocity produced, for example, by ceiling and desk fans to complement natural ventilation. At that point, you can raise the set point and be comfortable at 27, 28 degrees. This might look as a bit strange, difficult to do. but as usual, someone is doing it already, and Japan has this Cool Beads campaign, which runs, I think, since 15 years, where in all public buildings, the temperature in summer is raised, and a relaxed building dressing code is mandatory for in public buildings, and also practice in a number of corporate buildings, business spaces. What comes out from interviews, standardized interviews published in academic journals, is that women have been particularly favorable to this change, because women correctly wear light dresses in summer, and they are not obliged now to bear, let's say, very cool situations in buildings to allow their men colleagues to wear heavy clothes. This, by the way, is perfectly in line with comfort science, with what we know from hundreds of thousands of interviews in the ASHRAE comfort database, and now in the ASHRAE standard 55, updated in 2023. And so the issue is also and in the report we discuss, is it individual behavior, or a transformation which involves the society and its infrastructures, both physical infrastructures and societal infrastructures, institutions, legislations, norms, that will allow this sufficiency to progress and deliver its benefits. And again, I try to do an example. The new directive on energy performance of buildings, approved in 2024, provides for the first time a mandate to have a minimum bicycle parking standard in every country in Europe. So for new buildings, for major renovations, there is a mandate to have at least 2 bicycle parking spaces for every residential building unit. This is connected now to having also car parking, but the recital says that this should apply also to buildings which don't have car parking in the building or the property of the building. And again, this seems to be a bit strange. It was considered a bit strange when, in fact, I first proposed this in the ITRE committee when the building directive was being prepared. But there are examples, again, Japan, where there is no or little car parking obligation when you build a new building. So you don't need to employ space in the building and to host cars, which sometimes are really not needed in many situations. And this contributes also to limit the cost of housing. An infrastructure which is not built, obviously, for cars is a lower cost. And obviously, the infrastructures for hosting safely bikes are much smaller, much less costly, and needed to allow to safely own a bike and be sure to find it again the next day. These are obviously things that can be done very well, very neatly, and very efficiently in terms of space and materials needed. And there are other infrastructures which can allow to use bicycles and public transport to have a connection between bicycles and trains, for example, and highly expand the accessibility of trains, which are, for example, these very simple inclined planes, ramps, rather than stairs, which are everywhere, for example, in Switzerland, and allow you to join the train with your bicycle, or or simply with your legs, which is sometimes very difficult to do for the old people we will all be in a few years. Climbing stairs with luggage, if not with a bike, is a challenge that we should avoid by making more accessible these things.
Like 2 minutes to conclude.
Yeah, perfect. I'm going there. So obviously, the benefits that we know, but we should emphasize at every step, also with concrete examples of how to do it, is that a change to sufficiency in mobility is a great benefit for children, disabled people, old people, to have access to the city rather than being confined in small spaces and having difficulty to move around. And this is being done in many cities very quickly, like in Paris, we see Rue Rivoli as it was and as it is today. This has an effect on buildings too, because doing cooling buildings passively means opening up these buildings at night, and this can be done in a quiet city. It can hardly be done in a very noisy and polluted city. So sufficiency is also opening up other possibilities for sufficiency in transport, opens up possibilities for sufficiency and efficiency in buildings. And if we think this will be small, I just quote a recent paper on Nature, where we show how big can be the impact, quantitative impact of sufficiency together with efficiency in cutting enough the overall energy use in Europe, and then being able to provide it with renewables. And I think that's what I was trying to say.
Okay,
Thanks.
That's it. Or you want to add something? No, that's it. Okay. Thank you very much, Lorenzo, for these striking and meaningful examples, which gives us actually a better understanding of how sobriety can, sufficiency, sorry, can be applied to buildings, furniture, and even also benefits some more societal issues such as social justice and equity. So thanks again. Again, as a quick reminder, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat room. We'll try to answer them at the end of the session if we still have some time. And now we'll give the floor to Kelly, who will show us how sufficiency can be applied to the field of architecture too.
Merci, Damien. Let me know. Can you see my screen now? Oh, here we go. Excellent. Great. Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I'm here representing Architecture 2030, which, David, thank you for the shout out to my colleague Lisa Richmond and our joint friend Lloyd Alter as well. I'm an architect. I'm Canadian, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Architecture 2030 is doing, and then how this kind of applies to a North American perspective. So Architecture 2030 is an NGO that's been working to rapidly decarbonize the built environment. We've been involved with COP since COP21, and we've been also an active member of the Sufficiency Action Group, and are currently planning to establish a hub in North America to bring these principles to North America. Now, I think in that work, highlighting a few things here of the levers that are part of this and how they apply to specifically buildings and infrastructure today, and thinking about, as a North American, and I'd probably, David, an Australian very good proxy, is that our buildings are too big and they're too far apart. And that really is what drives emissions. And the role of the built environment in our lives is significant in this. So to illustrate this a bit, I started a company called Half Climate Design a few years ago, based on the premise we need to have emissions in the decade we're in, the 5 years we have left. And to have those emissions, it's really important to think about, you know, where you are and what that means. And so as a Canadian, I like to say, like, we are the worst. We have the highest emissions in the G20. As you can see, I moved to the United Kingdom, where I currently live. That cut my footprint by 2/3, and I used to live in Rwanda. And so what it means to have my emissions, it has to do with everything about where you live and the infrastructure of the city that you live within. And so you can see these are 3 streets that I've spent the bulk of my life on. The house on the left I grew up on, the house in the middle where I spent a formative period of my life in Rwanda, and the house I currently live in. And you can see where the too big and too far apart really comes to bear. And if you think about where our emissions sit, our operational emissions, our transportation emissions have everything to do with the spatial fabric of our cities. Now, I've been working over the last year with the Government of Canada, their Treasury Board, developing this primer to guide all federal procurement. And part of it is the concept of sufficiency is really foregrounded in it through an adaptation of this kind of hierarchy of mitigation from our friends at IStructD. So as you can see, it starts with building less, then building sufficiently, and making its way down at the bottom of using low carbon materials, where I think a lot of the focus has been to date in the built environment. That's the least efficacious part of this triangle, you can see. And so from the beginning, you know, building less or nothing is the first question we should ask here, right? So 100% of emissions exist. Do you need a new building? We have a lot of built infrastructure, the Government of Canada. Can we make better use of it? Can we be readapting it? But on the sufficiency lens, you know, how do we start designing for minimums and not maximums? And what is the minimum amount of space that you'd need in your department? What are the minimum requirements of the structures that we're building? And really be thinking about this as a way forward. And then to help the intended audience of this are procurement officials and building managers, to help questions to ask in the creation of the brief and questions to ask of architects and engineers over the course of a project. So this is an early stage, you know, what's the largest space in your program? Could it be reduced? What are the minimum spans you need? To the Lorenzo slides, do we need mechanical heating and cooling in every part of your building? Like really questioning, I think, the fundamental assumptions that we Canadians bring to buildings. And as a way to illustrate that, a hospital that that took part of the design here in the United Kingdom 2 years ago with Hawkins, Brown, White, and Ramble. At the very beginning of designing this children's hospital, we did an assessment of span of the hospital's program. How could we limit span? And so we worked with the program of the building, of the brief, and the largest room in the brief was an operating theater that needed a 7.8 meters clear span. And we said, okay, that's the minimum. What are the other grid dimensions that would satisfy the complexity of a hospital? And we found that grid dimensioning, reducing grid dimension more than material choice, was the single biggest reduction in embodied carbon. And we ended up going with a flat slab concrete. But the move from 9.3 to 7.8 was significant. So applying these kind of principles early in a process have enormous cost and carbon differences. Now, I think at the scale of a city, some work we're currently engaged in back home in Toronto. Toronto's the fastest growing city in North America. There's an airport called Downsview in the north part of the city that's now being redeveloped. And we were asked to look at the master plan that was developed by Henning Larsen and KPMG last year. And you can see there's going to be roughly 60,000 units of housing built in here in the next 15 years. And there's two avenues that run kind of north-south, on a diagonal. They're 100 meters apart, 150 meters apart in some places. And then there's a series of kind of ladders of streets that are, you know, between 200 and 100 meters long. But in the city of Toronto, if that road is an avenue, it has a certain design requirement. It says, if you are an avenue, you must be this wide. You must be 33 meters wide. You must have 4 lanes. You must have 2 lanes of bike lanes, right? And that didn't make a lot of sense. Likewise for the streets, like why build so much capacity right beside each other? And so the developer, Northcrest, asked us, well, what if we reduce the capacity? What if we make our infrastructure more sufficient? What happens? Well, lo and behold, the size of the roads, they decrease, and the size of the insides of the blocks increase. And there's subtle differences here that you can see, but what really happens is profound, is that simply questioning the size of our infrastructure in North America, which is over-provided, it's over-sufficient, it's not sufficient, is that a few things happen. We reduce the upfront emissions that David referred to, modestly on a unit basis, but significantly on a deferred infrastructure perspective. We increase density, it's 145 more units. That's better for the developer's perspective. That's more tax base for the city of Toronto. There's 5% more green space, or 10% more green space. That's great from resiliency and livability. 5% more ground floor area. That's more commerce, more job creation. 35% less road area to build and maintain if you're a city. That's a significant savings. And I think to conclude, North America's challenge is of shrinkage right now. How do we live with less? How do we think about sufficiency as a way to get out of the conundrum that we're facing right now? Cities face enormous infrastructure challenges, and by reducing the size of our cities when we move forward, it's going to, as David mentioned, we're going to drink less champagne, and we're going to have a better time and create more jobs in the process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. I didn't even have to let you know the time. So we will now. I will now going to hand over to Julie, and she will quickly show us how public policy has a role to play.
Yes, hi everyone. So I'm Julie Prigent. I'm working at ADEME, which is the French National Agency for Ecological Transition. Today, to accompany the launch of these great reports that we've been supporting, I'll be presenting some French examples of what could be achieved through real estate sufficiency. So how to live with less then, Kelly will get into that. So to be honest here, there are two key messages. I think the slide's not to its biggest size, Damien, but I don't know if people can read it.
Yeah, I mean, can you share it on your screen, and I'll put you as a
I'm
presenter?
not sure I have the hands to do that.
But I can have it, like I can also show it for you if you want to.
Yeah.
Okay, just give me a sec then.
Sorry.
No, that's all right.
It's just that there are very small writing, so I'm not sure people could read. Yeah, I think that's better. Thank you. So two key messages here. One is that there is a very important potential for sufficiency in the existing built environment in our country. Of course, the French example is one of a developed and aging country. We've seen North America just before. France is not exactly the same, but still developed and aging, so that should really be taken into account. The second message is that it is possible to already have policies to achieve sufficiency in real estate now at all scales, as I'll be demonstrating. So ADEME has been calculating different scenarios to achieve net zero carbon emissions in France by 2050. One of them, the best one really, is a sufficiency scenario. Here and now, French dwellings are 10% vacant, 10% only used as holiday homes, and of the remaining 80%, 69 are under-occupied or insufficiently occupied. Additionally, outside of the land dwellings part of our built environment, vacancy has been rising and rising since COVID in offices. So according to our sufficiency scenario, were we to implement ambitious and diverse policies for sufficiency in the real estate, we would only need to build 4 more million new dwellings by 2050 instead of 10 million under a business as usual scenario. To reach this goal, we already have existing policies, but in place by a variety of stakeholders at different scales. Some of them resonate with David, Lorenzo, and Kelly's interventions. To cite a few, some pension funds propose moving subsidies to some populations for them to get into more appropriate dwellings, for modest elderly people to be able to move into smaller apartments, for instance. Or we have some innovative social landlords proposing housing exchange schemes between large families and individual tenants, for example. Our ministry also implemented a national plan to fight housing vacancy recently, and some cities are taking action on their sites too, like FIJAC. So FIJAC, and it resonates with earlier remarks. FIJAC proposes subsidies for first-time buyers to buy old houses downtown rather than build new ones on the outskirts of town. So yeah, David, that was directly resonating with your remarks. Again, we have a wide array of policies to intensify uses, to restructure buildings instead of demolishing them. And recently, we've also been trying to anticipate more future use changes in buildings. The city of Bordeaux has seen its first no destination building permit. This will allow the owner to not go through the whole administrative process again to change the use of the building. So as you can see, these policies and measures are put into place by local authorities, pension funds, social landlords, ministries, and even now the Parliament is debating a bill on converting office space into housing. Now, we really need to have all hands on deck, and that's my main message here. Diverse stakeholders involved, and with these complementary measures, we will be able to advance towards a better scenario led by sufficiency principles. And I'll stop here so we have time for the rest and the questions. Thank you, Damien.
Thank you, Julie. I'll have to hand over. Here you go. Oh. So here you go. So thanks again, Julie, for those really interesting policy public perspectives. I will now hand over to Konish, and he will present us some perspectives by the GlobalABC and the UN. I guess you have, okay, let me just switch your role as a presenter so that you can, oh no, you said you didn't have
Thanks, Damien. I don't have any slides.
Yeah.
But I would just want to give a short introduction on the GlobalABC and the importance of sufficiency and the hub and the amazing work that the hub has been doing in the context of the GlobalABC. So the GlobalABC is a community of around 400 members, including 42 countries, with the aim of mobilizing collective efforts to assist governments and the private sector into implementing decarbonization and resilience strategies. Now, what that means through a sufficiency lens is that this involves prioritizing reduced consumption and efficient resources, while also ensuring that these measures are adaptable to diverse regional and socioeconomic contexts, speaking to the global north and the global south context as it was outlined in your amazing report. Just a line also about the hubs and action groups. The GlobalABC has 10 hubs and action groups. And hubs and action groups are defined and set up based on topical needs and relevant subjects within the built environment. So of course, sufficiency has emerged and has been one of the most critical topics that the GlobalABC is looking at, hence why we have the Sufficiency Action Group, which has now become a hub. And that being said, the Sufficiency Hub, in my view, because I work as a green building specialist, and I also coordinate a lot of the work of the hubs and action groups. To me, the Sufficiency Hub plays a vital role in stitching together many of the other hubs within the GlobalABC ecosystem. For example, David mentioned low carbon materials. That directly speaks to the materials hub. Lorenzo spoke about passive cooling, and we have an action group specifically looking at passive cooling. So I think there's immense opportunity for the hub to connect and work alongside other hubs and action groups. I wanted to take also a moment to congratulate the hub on the report. I think it's an amazing report, and what stood out to me specifically was some tangible and implementable recommendations for the policymakers. For example, optimizing land use, minimizing resource demand, and data-driven action. I think that's another opportunity because we have a hub within the GlobalABC called the Data Hub. So that's another opportunity of collaboration because we recognize the importance of data to decarbonize the built environment. That being said, in terms of next steps, I really look forward to this collaboration within the GlobalABC, also with external stakeholders. This report and this work of the hub not only highlights the potential of sufficiency to reduce upfront carbon emissions, but also long-term resource consumption and its vital role in creating an equitable, inclusive, and resilient future. I'll stop there, and for any questions related to GlobalABC, UNEP, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Konish, for reminding us the importance of this action hub and the importance of promoting sufficiency at a global rank through fruitful connections and collaboration. So this is my turn now. I'll just share with you some slides. So what's next actually? A4NT is delighted to continue the work begun last year for this new season of structuring and developing sufficiency at an international level. Supported by ADEM and in partnership with Ifpeb and all our GlobalABC partners, this session will focus on two main objectives. The first one will be to spread the sufficiency first principle through actions to ensure fair access to resources while staying within planetary boundaries, as David reminded us in the introduction. And the second one will be to provide tools that can support sufficiency, such as those related to mobility, urban planning, and building regulations. So to do so, we need a detailed action plan for the next season. So what are the next steps for the hub? We'd like to continue the efforts initiated by the network and develop an action plan for the upcoming year 2025 by planning those following actions. So the first one will be to create an interactive knowledge sharing platform. So we aim to develop an online interactive map to showcase successful sufficiency projects across regions. And the goal, of course, is to inspire applications and clarify sufficiency concepts. And then we'd like to create specific communication campaigns. So the idea is to elaborate 3 targeted advertising campaigns to raise awareness of sufficiency benefits for both decision makers and the public. And again, here the goal is to overcome the cultural resistance and inspire action for all. So after that, we'd like to focus on building and standardizing metrics with the help of experts from the hub. The group aimed to develop new metrics for tracking building sufficiency, focusing on resource preservation and housing needs. And by doing this, we'll be able to improve the data-driven decision making. We also want to take into consideration regional differences. This is really important. So we plan to work on benchmarking and make the recommendation more specific. Therefore, the action to be implemented aims at the development of a regional policy by creating region-specific policy recommendations based on the sufficiency principle. And this will make it possible to adapt policies to regional socioeconomic conditions and background. And last but not least, of course, it's extremely important to focus on disseminating and promoting the work done by highlighting the outcomes and organizing high impact events like this one. So we also gather and spread the recommendations for public policies. So our final call to action will be to achieve decarbonization and social equity by encouraging new collaborations and strengthening the existing ones, as collaboration across regions and sectors will be key in ensuring that we build a sustainable and inclusive future. So this is it to me. I just want to conclude by thanking you all around me for taking part in this online event. We really hope to see you soon at another major events like this to promote energy sufficiency and to continue to spread the word. So we'd like also to take this opportunity to extend our deepest thanks to all the report's contributors, and especially those who are here today to present the main lines of the report, which has been officially unveiled earlier this morning. Their presence today, despite challenging time differences, shows that their commitment and desire to share these promising perspectives with you all around the world. So we look forward for the work ahead and wish you like a pleasant end to COP29. I personally look forward to hearing from you if you want to explore certain topics in a greater depth. I don't think that there is any question. I will just try not. Okay, I will turn off the share of my screen, and I'm not sure that we can. Do we have any question in the chat? I don't think so. Okay, but still, like I just really want to thank you all again for your participation. It's still early, but we are on time. It's quite unusual for an event like this, so I'm really glad to get you involved, and we'll remain at your disposal if you have any question. Thank you very much. Do you want to have the last word, Cedric? No, it's all good. Okay. No. Then thank you very much, and have a good night or day, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you so much.
Goodbye. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.